Have you ever met somebody that you just are in awe of how they've gotten through the things they've gotten through, like laundry list, right? Well, today's guest, Laura Mangum Broome, is going to be one of these people now that you're going to learn about her story. She went through between 2015 and 2020 before the pandemic, just, health condition issues, divorce, death of a family member, all the things that you can think of kind of lined up in her life over that short period of time when you think about it. I want you today to join us and listen to her story. And I also want you to listen for how she has miraculously approached all of these things in her life. She has a mindset where she is always looking for the opportunity and the challenge. And I really loved her approach, her resiliency coaching approach. She has freebies that are going to be in the notes that you can see for the podcast today. But I really want you to join us today because listening to her speak is really inspirational. And she's just going to be one of those people that you're like, how does she do that? How does she look at it from that angle? So keep listening. Welcome. This is Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started.
Are you on my mailing list yet? Because if you're not, you really should be. You want to join at learntoloveyourstory.com. If you scroll down, I'm giving away a freebie for you. Honestly, you know what it is? A free course. I sell online courses, but this is a course just for you. And it's about freeing yourself, letting go of what others' expectations and ideas are for you. You know, that nagging self-doubt in your head, it's usually fueled by your consideration of what others think of you over your consideration of what you think of you. And so I teach you in my video all about what is underlying that kind of self-doubt and how to get out of that conundrum. And I give you a workbook that goes with it that helps you to build the skill sets that you're going to need for that. So please make sure you're on my mailing list because at the least, you're going to get a free gift. And at the most, you're going to hear about all the things that we're doing on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving and learntoloveyourstory.com. And you don't want to be missing out on any of the new things that'll be coming your way.
Welcome back, everybody, to Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. Today's guest is Laura Mangum Broome, who is a resiliency coach. And boy, has she gotten the paces to learn resiliency skills, as you will hear today in our podcast. But let me introduce you to her first. Laura Mangum Broome is a resilience coach and author who helps individuals move beyond adversity and flourish in life. After overcoming 4 life-changing events in a 5-year period, she developed her I Cope to Hope 3-step resilience framework to help others transform pain into purpose and rediscover joy. Does this sound familiar to you? Because I say some of the same things with learntoloveyourstory.com. In her spare time, Laura is a volunteer mentor in youth aging out of the foster care system. So you can see why I wanted her to be on the podcast with us. So let's welcome Laura. Welcome back, everybody, to Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. Today we have a guest with us, Laura Mangum Broome, and she's going to share a ton with us. I'm not even going to sneak peek it. I'll just let her share with you. But thank you very much, Laura, for being on the podcast today. We are so excited to have you here with us.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So First question, always right out the gate for every one of our guests. Tell us your story.
Well, I have a big story. So I'm just going to kind of tell a little bit of it first, and then we can talk more about it.
Perfect.
Otherwise, I'll be talking for half the program. But in 2020, going through the pandemic like everybody else, I also went through a heart transplant and a divorce 1 month later. And so my whole world just crumbled, and the idea of having to start over at age 58. I was helping my husband run a business, and just everything. It's like I remember thinking the first thing, I don't want to be another statistic. I don't want to be a middle-aged, woman, divorced, and, husband left me for another younger woman. And so that I just was going through so many emotions at that time.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. So you had a heart condition, obviously, prior to that. And, we're also going through the emotional turmoil of the dissolution of a marriage at the same time. Like, wow. I don't even have words to describe how crazy that must have been. Yes.
It was, because not only were we being quarantined for the pandemic, but I was having to quarantine just for a year after the heart transplant.
Wow.
So it really left me with limited resources on how do I start over.
I can't even imagine. I can't imagine. So, well, keep speaking about this, because you are now a resiliency coach. And so I'm curious kind of what got you from being in those dark stages and taking the call, and now on the other side of this, helping other women through similar circumstances.
Well, as you mentioned, the heart transplant came as a result of going through breast cancer a couple of years prior. And so everything went, I have to say, fairly well during my breast cancer journey.
Okay.
Because when I got diagnosed, first thing the doctor said is it's curable. So
Lovely.
I was like, okay, just tell me what I need to do to get through this, and I'll do whatever you say. And that's where I realized it could be a lot worse, but it's not. And that kind of became my foundation of everything that I had been through. And I had been through some other difficult challenges prior to that, but really from 20 through 20, those were the double whammies, and I say, because going through breast cancer, when chemo treatments ended, that's when my heart issues started. And it turned on a genetic marker for congestive heart failure.
Interesting. I have not heard that could be a thing. Wow.
Well, it took a while to figure that out. It took a couple of years to figure that out. But I have an identical twin sister who had just been diagnosed with congestive heart failure. And so I made sure I went to her cardiologist. And he was wonderful, because it after running a bunch of tests, he realized, y'all are twins. Y'all, you're having the same things going on. Let's go get you to the heart clinic and find out if this is genetic. And so we did. We found out that it was. But while I was, after my cancer treatments, I went and had a double mastectomy. And while I was in the hospital with getting ready to have my surgery, my older son, who was 19 at the time, died by suicide. And it was completely unexpected. And I was already dreading the surgery. And then this happened, and they offered to delay the surgery, but it's like, no, I've come this far. Let me just get that over with, and I'll grieve. And so we had a lot of support. It was a difficult time. We had just adopted him 10 years prior from another country, and everything had been going fine. But evidently the last couple of months he was going through something that we knew something was going on, but we had, I still don't really know what all happened, but I realized I can't, doing the what if I should have, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to bring him back.
No.
And so I went through the grief process and recovered from my chemo, my cancer. I was cancer free, which was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped during the grief process. But then a couple of years later is when the pandemic happened and all that stuff. So
I mean, how crushing! It's soul crushing. Each of those things discreetly can overcome us and overwhelm us. And yet you had just a layering of these things, one right on top of the other. I am so sorry, by the way, for your loss of your son. That's just terrible. When individuals die by suicide, it's just, it's so hard to manage the grief of that.
It was. And the important thing in all these situations is that I process the grief.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what allowed me to move forward.
Yeah.
As a Christian, that played a big part in the process too. So, but I had so many people to live for that it wasn't about me. It was, about them too. I mean, everybody processes grief in a different way, in a different time, and to some people, it might have looked like I didn't grieve what they were expecting. Yes. But to me, grief is private.
It's private and personal. And it like you said, everybody's is going to look different. Everyone's.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so as long as I knew I was handling it and I was processing my emotions. Now, when I went through my divorce, that was really harder because after, almost 30 years, I was married half my life.
Yeah.
And every marriage has their ups and downs, but you don't really think your spouse is just going to move on without you.
I know. I know.
And I laugh now, but I was just kind of in shock. Like, how do you just flip the switch and move on? And along the way, some things came to light. And while I was going through the grief stage, I became angry when I started discovering things. But then it's like I was angry. I realized I'm angry at me too, because I'm longing for something that's never going to happen. A reconciliation was was not one of the choices.
Right.
He moved on. So how am I going to move on?
Yeah.
And so I went back to our marriage counselor that we had seen a year prior, I think a year prior. And because I didn't want to rehash everything to somebody new.
I totally can empathize with that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And so she was wonderful because she helped me try to keep looking forward. What are you going to do this week? And because I was seeing her on a weekly basis at first, and she just kept me with my eyes moving forward. And, while I was working with my divorce attorney, and that really was the best thing to know that she gave me an exercise. I had to come up with a week worth of, schedule because was trying to move forward. That's when I thought, well, what am I going to do? I'll be, I can help other people get over difficult situations because I know what worked for me through trial and error. And I don't want them to have to go through the trial and error stage. Maybe I can help them learn from my mistakes, and so she kept me busy with that and, made sure that I got some exercise in and things like that. So every week I would send her my schedule. And then when I met with her, I'd tell her, how it went. So, but I realized it became where I would wake up in the morning and I'd just say, what can I do today? And that's kind of how it started. And I realized I can't do that, but I can do this.
That's interesting. So that was one of the biggest takeaways for you is like, in the limited, here's the circumstances. I'm not going to get remarried. Reconciliation isn't a thing, but what can I do? Like you really focused on in the here and now, what are the steps that I can be taking when, your life literally imploded in many, many ways.
Right. Well, really, what else what was I going to do? Sit and have a pity party?
Yeah, it's an option though, Laura. It's an option that a lot of people take.
Well,
and it doesn't help them in any way. It doesn't serve them.
Right. And I had already been having my pity party, while going through, the initial shock of my marriage ending. And so one thing that I did was, when I would wake up in the morning, I made myself get out of bed and make my bed. And that truly does. Now, I never did that when I was married because my husband got up after I did. So, it made such a big difference because it kept me from crawling back into bed, and it kind of felt like things were in order.
Yeah.
I had a couple of throw pillows on my bed. And so when I looked at my bed, I thought, that's in order. I like that feeling. I accomplished something this morning.
Yeah.
And so I just kept taking baby steps, to keep moving forward. And I mean, it wasn't real easy. I had my ups and downs, and some days I just allowed myself to have an off day. And, I told myself, one day having, one bad day is not going to turn into a one bad week.
No.
So it's like, get it out of your system, and tomorrow's a new day. Get up and do something productive.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, I think there's such empowerment in those very small steps too, right? They seem minuscule when you're looking on the outside at this great big picture, but in those moments, they can feel, like the biggest thing that you do for yourself is to get out of bed and make that bed. And then literally the first thing that you're doing for yourself is something for you, or first thing you do with your day is something for you. And the last thing you see before you go to bed is the first thing that you did for yourself. Like those are impactful small steps of resiliency. Definitely.
It is. And, when I realized, when I read about radical acceptance, and that was like my aha moment. That was when I understood what radical acceptance was. It's, accepting what's out of your control and doing something with what's in your control. And that was my aha moment. And between the anger of just being sick and tired of my pity party, and it's like, okay, I got a new heart. I have a new chance at life. What am I going to do? Am I going to waste it?
Yeah.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda, or am I going to just take the reins and be in charge of my life?
Yeah.
And that's when things started turning around.
Yeah.
And I always say radical acceptance was just a game changer for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to approve of it. You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it, acknowledge it. It is what it is. That's my saying between I can't do that, but I can do this.
But I can do this. Well, it's a powerful ability to kind of shift then towards what can I do, right? When we let go of trying to change the things we cannot change, then we're freed up and liberated to change the things that we can. And that's really what those principles in the Serenity Prayer are talking about. And the idea of radical acceptance is really about arriving there, being able to discern between the things that are just, I can't do anything about it. I have a heart condition.
Right.
Can't do anything about that. Had cancer. Can't do anything about that. I can, though, decide to get up and make my bed. I can, though, decide to get up and every single day be invested in myself and figuring out how to overcome what I've gone through here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And another thing that I started practicing was gratitude, because at first, I had to move out of my house. We had a nice house. I mean, like I said, just everything changed.
Yeah.
I just told myself it could be a lot worse. Find 3 things to be grateful for today.
Yeah.
So by the end of the day, I had to tell myself what were 3 things I was grateful for. And sometimes it was just, well, at least it's not worse, you know?
Yeah.
And so that started making me feel better too, was keeping that journal. I would keep it on my phone.
Yeah.
You know, just so that when I was having a bad day or a bad moment, I could go back to that list, and I kept it going. I didn't, I started where I couldn't keep it on my phone anymore. So I just would journal. I was journaling at the time too.
I think that's brilliant, just because it's, you know, you can put it right by your bed and do it at the start of the day, the end of the day, both. I mean,
throughout the day.
Yeah. I just think that it's a nice cornerstone, and it really does exercise that mindset of seeing what is working in the world, what you are, grateful for in the world, what's helping you. When we're so biologically pre-programmed to stay focused on problems and solve problems, like this is our evolution, right? In the savannah, if there's a tiger or lion under the tree that had an apple, we had to want to get away from the lion more than want to get the apple. Like, we had to survive, right? But the evolutionary down regulation of that, you know, once you get to this age, is unfortunately we're more sensitive to see the things that aren't working and want to keep picking at that scab, so to speak, than to look at what to be grateful for, what is working, or what we like. We don't have to ward against what we like. We have to ward against what we don't like, or what is not, you know, what we might not survive, or what is not working for us in our life. So there's you know, a lot of science behind using that kind of gratefulness practice, or looking at the world in that way. I'm curious, Laura, as you've, you know, kind of shared with us these really difficult things that you've been through, and your approach to them being so kind of, you already were tinged, it seems, towards acceptance and looking for the things that would work for you and what you could do. Can you share with my audience, how is that? Like, what is it about you that had you looking for those more empowered, agency-based, what can I do here types of choices in your life, rather than being in the pity party, rather than staying in that other space?
Like I said before, I've been through a lot of ups and downs, nothing to that degree, but I had to start looking back over my life and say, you know, how did you get through those things? How did you get through those situations? And I mean, sometimes I had strengths that I didn't always use, but they came out when I needed them. And so I really kind of did a self-assessment of what were my skills, my talents, my character strengths that I could use to pull myself out.
Yeah.
Now, I had a lot of, I love inspiring stories, and going
we
through
love those
my
here.
medical.
We love them too.
I know. Well, that's really what kept me going, because I met so many people during my health journeys that they had gone through situations, and you hear their stories and you go, my gosh, I don't think I could have handled that. And so I think that's one thing is so important for us to share our stories, because you never know when your story is going to be, you know, someone's survival manual. And I had a lot of people in my life, over my life, that it you know, it's like, if they can do it, I can too. I don't know how, but I can do it. And I think that's what I pulled from, because we have a purpose in life. And a lot of us, I mean, this was me too. I'm a nurturer. I'm a caregiver type person. And when I realized, when I'm not in that position of helping others, I'm just in that mundane, I got to do this, I got to do that. Or, you know, I don't feel happy, or I don't feel like my life has meaning and purpose. And I realized I was in that rut before all the health issues and my marriage ending. And I think going through that degree of difficulty, it gave me so much insight on what is important to me and what's important in my life, and the appreciation I have more for relationships and for community. And it really was a wake-up call. Now, I don't recommend people go through that type of stuff to get the wake-up call. No. But I think, but like what I want, people, your audience, just really people in general to understand, are you living a fulfilled life?
Yes.
And if not, what's holding you back?
Yeah.
And for most people like me, it was, I'm miserable in my comfort zone.
Yes.
But it's my comfort zone.
Yes. I'm comfortable in my misery. That's really what it is. Yes. I think that there is something to, like, we just get so, feel so secure and safe in the familiar, even when the familiar is not, it certainly isn't in alignment with what our purpose is in the world, but it's not even serving us. We might even be fully aware it's not serving us, but the scary of doing something we don't know how to do versus staying in the same, that scary just keeps us in these, ruts essentially and stuck in our life. And that definitely is for the midlife woman, right? I think this is the crux of the transition. And for some of us, the bottom really falls out, like what you're describing. For some of us, it doesn't do that though. It's not a grand thing, but it's just kind of the little things that naturally will start to transition at this point in our life. We can start with our biology. Right. We're going to go through perimenopause to menopause. That's a huge overhaul in our body, not unlike adolescence being a huge overhaul between like 14 and, or, 12 and 20 or something. This is the second time in our life when our bodies are just going to be a different body at the end of it. Like that is literally what's happening. And so it starts with that, but it also starts in our roles. If we were parenting, our kids are aging out of our homes and we don't know what to do with that aspect of our life. Our parents are aging and we might need to be the caretaker of those parents. And so we're showing up differently there. Our worthiness and, for the Gen X woman, the worthiness in the workplace a lot of times came from being the unsung hero, the quiet one in the background that was always the reliable one. Well, that isn't going to work in this day and age in the workplace, right? So you're going to get pushed and walked over, and other people younger than you are going to be given the job opportunities and promotions that you're not getting because people kind of took for granted that you were the backbone of the business, doing nothing and being an unsung hero in the background. And I think it's kind of a layering of all those small incremental changes in and of themselves kind of become a culmination in the midlife stage. And if you're not ready to switch from familiar to unfamiliar, you're going to be in that crisis state of mind. But midlife crisis for women looks like things like depression and resentment and not finding joy in what used to be joyful for them. And it doesn't look like sports cars. It doesn't look like divorces. No. It doesn't look like starting, dating somebody half your age. That's traditionally what we've been fed is a midlife crisis, but that's not what it looks like for women.
No. And I think to add on to what you said too, is I think we get to the point where we've taken care of everybody else. Or, and now what are we going to do with our lives now? Yeah. And I think that's when we have to kind of step out of that comfort zone a little bit. And I call it the Goldilocks zone because it's that fine line between excitement and panic. You want a little bit of excitement in your life, but you don't want too much. Like I laugh because it's like I got thrown out of my comfort zone and the door was shut and
locked
and there was no way. It was like no way going back. So I had to step out of my comfort zone. But looking back, it was scary. It was the unknown. But I love who I am today, and all those hardships made me who I am today. And I have more joy in my life. I have, I don't see obstacles as roadblocks. I see them as something good's going to come of this,
Yeah.
and it's going to be an opportunity.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, but something good's going to come of this.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look for that, you're going to find it more often.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to
Absolutely.
be big leaps.
No.
It's just going to be a little something,
Mm-hmm.
just a little baby step is what I like. I love baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
Baby steps are small. They're small risks, but when they work, oh my gosh, the result is so fantastic
It's so
because you
fantastic.
just learn something about yourself that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's science that supports this too. Like I like James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, for this reason. Early in that book, he'll talk about how the British cycling team couldn't win a Tour de anything for over 100 years. And they had somebody come in that analyzed things like what, the oil viscosity was in the gears, for their bikes, and, exercising this routine on this day versus this routine on that day. It made small incremental changes.
Massage oil.
Yes. Things like
massage
that.
oil. Who would have thought,
right?
Think of that.
And over a period of a handful of years, they started winning tours because of these very small incremental changes that if you had looked at it, you'd have been like, no, those are just like nothing. But it isn't nothing. Like the little habits exponentially become big deals later on in life. And so that mindset shift towards things that are difficult and challenging are opportunities. I don't even think you have to say it's going to be good or not good in the future. All I need to see is it's an opportunity. You change the mindset, you're going to start to see the things that make it an opportunity for you. You don't change the mindset and you're going to see the things that make it awful and you don't like it and you'll want to shut down.
That is so true. My dad always used to say, Laura, how do you eat an elephant? And, one bite at a time.
Exactly.
And I can't tell you how many times I had to.
You ate a lot of elephants.
Analogy. I ate a lot of elephants.
2015 and 2020. There's a lot of elephants to be eaten. Good Lord.
I did. But what you say is so true. Having that growth mindset means that you don't have failures. You just have ways that didn't work at that time. But maybe try and find that thing that does work. I laugh that I am I know so many ways how not to do things.
Yes,
but I know why. I do too. Yes. Okay, but I laugh because I know now why you don't do it that way. And to me, a lesson, because if it had not happened, I wouldn't understand why.
It's
true.
I
think I know better. Yeah. So I think when you're going through midlife, go try some new things.
Absolutely.
Make a bucket list and find something that does bring joy in your life, because nobody's going to make you happy but you. And if you can be happy being by yourself, enjoying your own company, knowing what your core values are, your expectations, you can set healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And you can live a fulfilling life knowing that you're living, I don't like the term so much, but your terms, but you're in charge of your life.
Yes.
And if you don't want toxic people in your life, you put those boundaries in place.
Yeah.
And you don't have to.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think there is some value to journeying into self focus, not selfishness in the way that we think culturally, but self-focus allows us to preserve this beautiful resource that we've been given from the start of time, since we've been here, to go out and do the things that we want to do in the world. Social or culturally, we were programmed to believe that we needed to be selfless, but then it made us our selfless, right? Then we weren't, you're just not able to bring 100% to everything. But I think as this midlife transition happens, if we're able to kind of lean into the opportunity of what feels challenging for us, we also could benefit from that self-focus of keeping better boundaries around what, is this something I need to do, or is this something I don't need to do? Do I want to partake in this? Do I not want to partake in this?
Right. and learn to say no.
Mm-hmm.
I know is hardly ever in my vocabulary.
Ooh.
And I know.
It's a tough one.
But it is tough. But when I realize you can just say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have time to help with that, or I mean, because if you're raising a family, the kids and all that stuff, you're the last one to take care of you.
Yeah.
And that self-care is so important. But when you can set those healthy boundaries and take time for yourself, the more self-care you provide for yourself, the more you can care for others.
Absolutely. That's
within,
the math.
within healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
But like now I've gotten back into hobbies that I have been on the back burner for years.
Yeah.
And I've got a granddaughter that's coming in a month. And
congratulations.
I know.
How
Thank
exciting.
you. So, I mean, like I said, life is going to have its ups and downs, but it's how you respond to it that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
And one thing that's constant is change.
Totally.
And when you can understand that concept, I think that's where it helps you to be flexible and adaptable.
That's right.
It's like the weather. You don't like the weather, wait a little bit, it'll change.
It'll change.
And,
yeah. Write it out. And there'll be something different in front of you. Yeah. What, if anything, is a piece of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with today that you could impart for, women that might be in the muck of the change, or even just leaning more into the, what did we decide it was? The comfort of their misery of staying in what they know. What's your advice? What's your wisdom for a woman in that space?
I would say, life dissatisfaction is a choice. You have the choice to decide if that's going to make you bitter or better.
That's right.
And I think because nobody can make you make that choice. You have to make it for yourself. And and whatever your choice is, then go with it.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody would choose to be better, because there's so much life to live and we all have so much potential, and I think everybody can make a difference in at least somebody's life.
Yeah.
And, and I think too, when we take the focus off you and look and see, how can I make my community, my whatever, my family, my friends, my work, how can I make it better for everybody else? Then that gives you a sense of purpose, something greater than you are. And changing that focus from me to others is a game changer too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're giving of yourself.
Yeah. Totally. It's a game changer for us as a community, as a greater community. It's a game changer for you on a personal level as well. I totally understand that. And I appreciate that bit of advice. I think that there's just something very powerful about the self-reflection and stepping into trying something different and embracing kind of challenge is not the enemy, right? It's responding. Your response is the place where you have the most control, and you will find your joy if you want to find your joy, and you will find your misery if you want to find your misery. Like that mindset, right? It's all on you either way. Right? I think that's a Henry Ford quote, right? Like failure, you will find failure, or you'll find success. Like you're gonna. It's just about where your mindset is,
right? And as why I like to tell everybody, you always have choices. You might not like them, but you still have a choice.
You still have them. Yeah, that's that. Yep, life is full of choices. Change is inevitable, so life is just full of what are you going to do with that, right? Exactly. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for being on the podcast today. And could you share with my listeners where they can find you? And of course, I will make sure all the links are in our notes for today as well. Sure.
The best place to find me is on my website, and it's icopetohope.com, and it's with the number 2. And I have a free resource that's available, 20 strategies to strengthen resilience and embrace change.
Mm-hmm.
And these, I guess, the main strategies, coping strategies, and resilience skills that I use to get over my hardships. And they're not hard to do at all. Some you might even be doing, but I would suggest you get a copy of that, because it's wonderful when you know something comes up and you go, oh, I can handle this, instead of that shock and go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And so those resilience skills are very important. And
Yes, they are.
And I have a free blog that you can read a lot of my stories, and have a free book on there as well.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and for all of those wonderful resources, because you are absolutely right. Resiliency skills are super important. I mean, we're going to go through those changes. So having those resources available is just invaluable for women at this stage. So thank you very much, Laura, for being on the podcast. And thank you for sharing those resources with my listeners.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's a story, is it not? My friends, oh my goodness. It was lovely to have Laura on the podcast. And I really hope that you have been able to glean something from this conversation that she and I had. It just felt like a conversation over coffee between a couple friends, but I really enjoyed her look and outlook on life. I tried to ask some questions to kind of get at, how does she do that? How is she thinking that way? I hope that you gathered little nuggets from that, because let me just say, if you could try any of those resiliency skills in your life, you're going to be better for it. And that, my friends, is how you're going to find your centered life thriving. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these 2 crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.